Tales of Enchantment, The Journey of Isabella. Once upon a time, in a far-off kingdom, there was a grand tower, nestled atop a hill surrounded by lush greenery. The tower was said to be the tallest in all the land, and many believed that it held great treasures and secrets. The tower was also home to a beautiful princess named Isabella, who was known far and wide for her grace, intelligence, and kind heart. She spent most of her days within the confines of the tower, surrounded by books and music, and would often gaze out of the window, dreaming of the world beyond. Despite her love for knowledge and her gentle nature, Isabella was not happy in the tower. She longed to explore the world and experience the wonders that lay beyond the castle walls. But her father, the king, forbade her from leaving the tower, fearing for her safety. Isabella's life was a lonely one. She had no companions save for her books and her music, and often felt trapped and suffocated within the tower. But she never gave up hope. Every night, she would look up at the stars and dream of a life of freedom and adventure. As time passed, Isabella grew into a beautiful and intelligent young woman. Many suitors came to ask for her hand in marriage, but she turned them all away, unwilling to spend her life trapped in another castle, another tower. Chapter 1: A Night of Adventure. One night, when the moon was full and bright, Isabella decided to sneak out of her tower and explore the world beyond. She carefully tiptoed down the stairs and out the door of her tower, feeling the cool night air on her face for the first time in her life. As she wandered through the forest, she stumbled upon a beautiful, talking little deer. The deer introduced herself as Selina and warned Isabella of the dangers that lurked in the woods. Selina explained that there were hunters who roamed the forest, looking for prey to capture or kill. Suddenly, they heard a noise coming from behind them. Isabella and Selina turned around to see a group of hunters emerging from the bushes. The hunters were armed with bows and arrows, ready to strike. Isabella knew that they had to act fast to save Selina. She took a deep breath, and with all her might, she let out a scream that echoed through the forest. The hunters were taken aback, and for a moment, they froze. Isabella took advantage of the moment and ran towards the deer. She picked Selina up in her arms and ran as fast as she could. The hunters quickly regained their senses and began chasing after Isabella and Selina. But Isabella was quick on her feet, and she was able to outrun them. She ran and ran until she was out of breath. Finally, when she was sure that they had lost the hunters, Isabella stopped and set Selina down on the ground. Selina looked up at her with gratitude and admiration. "Thank you, Isabella," Selina said. "You saved my life, and because of that, I will grant you one wish." Isabella was surprised. She had never heard of a talking animal granting wishes before, but she knew exactly what she wanted. "I wish to see the world beyond my tower," she said. Selina smiled. "Your wish is my command," she said. "But be careful what you wish for, Isabella. The world outside your tower is full of wonder and danger. You must be prepared for anything." With that, Selina disappeared into the forest, leaving Isabella alone to contemplate her wish. Isabella knew that she wanted to see the world beyond her tower more than anything else in the world. But she also knew that it would be a dangerous and unpredictable journey. Isabella tossed and turned in her bed, her mind filled with wonder and excitement from the night's adventures. She had always dreamed of leaving her tower and exploring the world outside, but her father, the king, had always kept her locked up for her own safety. However, on this particular night, she had managed to sneak out and see the world for herself. As she lay there, her thoughts kept drifting back to the speaking deer she had encountered in the forest. It had been a magical moment, one that she knew she would never forget. The deer had told her that she had a special wish waiting for her in the future, but Isabella couldn't quite figure out what it might be. Despite her exhaustion, Isabella's mind was too restless to let her sleep. She sat up in bed and gazed out the window at the stars, wondering what else the world had in store for her. As the first light of dawn crept into the room, Isabella finally drifted off to sleep, her dreams filled with images of adventure and possibility. But little did she know that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Next day, a young prince from a neighboring kingdom came to visit the tower. He had heard of the beautiful princess who lived there and was determined to win her heart. Isabella was hesitant at first, but as she got to know the prince, she realized that he was different from all the other suitors who had come before. The prince shared Isabella's love for knowledge and adventure, and he promised to take her away from the tower and show her the world. Isabella knew that it was a risky decision, but her heart sang with joy at the thought of finally experiencing the life she had always dreamed of. And so, Isabella took a leap of faith and left the tower with the prince, embarking on a journey of discovery and adventure that would change her life forever. Chapter 2. A Treacherous Journey. Isabella and her husband Edward were excited to begin their new life in the kingdom of the prince. They packed their bags and set out on the road with a coach, eager to start their new adventure. The journey was long and bumpy, but they didn't mind. They were together, and that's all that mattered. However, their journey was not as smooth as they had hoped. On the third day of their trip, they were ambushed by a group of outlaws. The coach was stopped in its tracks, and the outlaws demanded that they hand over all their valuables. Isabella and Edward were terrified, but they had no choice but to comply. After the outlaws had taken everything of value, including their wedding rings, they left Isabella and Edward stranded on the side of the road. They were devastated. Everything they had worked for was gone in an instant. Isabella and Edward had no choice but to continue on foot. They walked for hours with nothing but their clothes on their backs. They were exhausted and hungry, and Isabella began to feel sick. They had no idea how they were going to survive. Just when they thought things couldn't get any worse, Isabella was suddenly snatched away by a group of hooded figures. Edward was left alone and helpless, with no idea where his wife had been taken. Edward searched for his wife for days, but in vain Isabella was held captive by the outlaws and was afraid she would never see her husband again. She spent most of her days locked in a small, dark cell with barely enough food and water to survive. One day, while she was trying to come up with a plan to escape, she heard a faint whisper coming from outside her cell. It sounded like someone was trying to communicate with her. "Hello?" she called out, hoping whoever it was would hear her. "Yes, it's me," the voice replied. It was a young boy who had been captured by the outlaws as well. "What are you doing here?" Isabella asked. "I was traveling with my family when the outlaws attacked us and took me as their prisoner," the boy explained. Isabella was relieved to have someone to talk to, and soon they became fast friends. They shared stories about their lives, and Isabella even taught the boy some basic reading and writing skills. Days turned into weeks, and Isabella began to feel hopeless. She missed her husband terribly and worried that he was out there looking for her, but not able to find her. One day, the outlaws gathered around her cell and unlocked the door. They dragged her out into the open air and threw her onto a horse. "Where are you taking me?" she demanded. "To see our leader," one of the outlaws said with a smirk. Isabella's heart raced as they rode through the woods. She had no idea what was going to happen to her, but she knew it couldn't be good. As they approached the outlaw camp, Isabella was surprised to see that it was much larger than she had anticipated. There were dozens of tents and makeshift huts, and people milling about everywhere. They brought her before the leader of the gang, a large and imposing man with a scar on his face. He looked at her coldly and said, "You're the princess, aren't you?" Isabella didn't answer. She knew it was a bad idea to reveal her identity to these people. "We know who you are," the leader continued, "and we're going to use you to get what we want. Chapter 3. On the Run. Edward was determined to find his beloved Isabella. He asked the villagers if they had seen anyone matching her description, but they hadn't. He scoured the nearby woods and fields, but there was no sign of her. Desperate, he turned to a wise old woman who was known for her knowledge of the ways of the world. She listened to Edward's story and nodded thoughtfully. "I know of a man who may be able to help," she said. "He is a tracker, and he has helped many find lost loved ones." Without hesitation, Edward set off to find the tracker. It took him several days of hard travel, but eventually he came upon a small village where the tracker was said to live. The tracker was a grizzled old man with deep lines etched into his face. He listened to Edward's story and agreed to help. "I will need something of your wife's," he said. "A lock of hair or a piece of clothing." Edward dug through his belongings and found a small ribbon that Isabella had worn in her hair. He handed it to the tracker, who closed his eyes and concentrated. After a few moments, he opened his eyes and pointed to the west. "She is there," he said. "But beware, the road is treacherous, and there are many dangers along the way." Edward thanked the tracker and set off in the direction he had been given, determined to find his wife no matter what the cost. As he traveled, he encountered bandits, wild animals, and treacherous terrain. But he was determined, and he pressed on. Finally, he came across a camp for outlaws in a clearing. He approached cautiously, unsure of what he would find. As the night fell, Prince Edward quietly snuck into the camp. His heart raced with fear and excitement as he searched for Isabella. He moved silently through the shadows, avoiding any sign of danger. Finally, he found her. Isabella was tied up and surrounded by the bandits. Edward knew he had to act fast. With a swift and calculated move, he attacked the bandits and freed Isabella. As they ran back to their cottage, Edward and Isabella couldn't believe what had just happened. They were alive and together again, but the danger was still lurking. They had to leave the forest as soon as possible. Edward and Isabella made their escape from the bandit camp, but they knew they couldn't rest easy just yet. The remaining bandits were surely on their trail, seeking revenge for the prince's intrusion. They ran for hours through the dark forest, the sound of footsteps behind them growing fainter with every step. As they reached a clearing, they spotted a small cottage in the distance. With no other options, they decided to seek refuge there. The owner of the cottage, an elderly woman, welcomed them inside and listened to their tale of adventure and danger. As they rested by the fire, they could hear the sound of horses approaching. The bandits had caught up with them. The old woman quickly hid Edward and Isabella in a secret room and then bravely confronted the bandits. The bandits searched the cottage but found nothing. They left, cursing and threatening the old woman. As soon as they were gone, Edward and Isabella emerged from their hiding place, grateful for the woman's courage and kindness. But they knew they couldn't stay there for long. They needed to keep moving, to find a safe place to rest and plan their next move. With a heavy heart, they said their goodbyes to the kind old woman and continued on their journey. Chapter 4. A New Beginning. Edward and Isabella finally made it back to Edward's kingdom after their long and treacherous journey. They were exhausted, but relieved to be back home. However, they couldn't shake off the feeling that they had to do something about the insecurity of the kingdom's roads. As soon as they arrived, they summoned the kingdom's council and shared their experiences. The council listened intently as Edward and Isabella recounted their story, including their encounter with the bandits and the dangers they had faced on the road. The council was alarmed by what they heard and agreed that action needed to be taken. They brainstormed ideas on how to make the kingdom a safer place to live in, and Edward and Isabella spearheaded the efforts. First, they increased the number of guards along the kingdom's roads and built watchtowers at strategic locations. They also created a group of scouts to patrol the roads and report any suspicious activity. They made sure that the kingdom's citizens were well educated on safety measures while traveling and started a campaign to encourage them to travel in groups. As a result of these efforts, the roads became much safer, and the citizens could travel without fear. Trade flourished, and the economy of the kingdom improved. The people of the kingdom were grateful to Edward and Isabella for their efforts and hailed them as heroes. As Isabella settled into her new life with Edward, she found herself happier than she had ever been before. No longer did she feel trapped in her tower or lonely in her thoughts. With Edward by her side, she felt as though anything was possible. Together, they worked to make their kingdom a better place to live and put an end to the banditry that had once plagued their lands. As the years went by, Isabella watched with pride as the kingdom she and Edward had built flourished. She knew that she had found her true calling in life and that she was exactly where she was meant to be. And as she looked into Edward's eyes, she knew that she was happy, truly happy, with the life they had built together.